Hi, welcome back to Do Fix Differently. In this episode, I want to talk about whether it's possible to streamline fix onboarding. It's a question that we get from people from time to time. It's a bit of a leading question, of course, because the answer is yes. But it all goes back to one of the principles, one of our 5 key principles towards efficient connectivity, and that is deliberate process design. And that's what I really want to cover in this episode. Before I get to the detail though, I do want to just remind everybody, if you like the content that we're putting out in these videos, please click subscribe, click the notification bell to make sure that you don't miss anything. Okay, so let's talk about deliberate process design. Now, one of the things that we find when we talk to people about their existing connectivity process is it's just a patchwork of things that have evolved over the years and have kind of been passed down from person to person, almost like folklore around a campfire somewhere. And nobody really understands why this process is as it is, and it was never really deliberately designed. But nonetheless, they have a process, and therefore they follow the process. And they just sit there and scratch their heads and wonder why this process isn't actually the most efficient. And that is the key task that deliberate process design tries to tackle. It says, look, if you spend a little bit of time on a regular basis thinking about your process, optimizing your process, getting real world data points about how your process is performing, identifying the bottlenecks and cleaning them up, over time you'll end up with a much, much better process that accelerates your onboarding process, allows you to do far more things in parallel. And that is the key goal, is investing time in your process rather than spending time on your process. Best to change it, don't spend the time actually executing it. Now, what do I mean by a process? Well, first of all, I'll tell you what I don't mean. I don't mean some dusty process that is on some Confluence wiki page somewhere that you get some new joiner to read and then they probably forget about it. That's actually not a particularly great process in terms of what we're talking about here. Processes that are very effective are ones that are enforced. And what that means is they almost take the form of a checklist. So they must be followed from top to bottom in a particular order. Each series of tasks needs to be completed before the next ones are released. If it is a checklist, that's awesome. You could do that obviously as a paper-based exercise if you really wanted to, or nowadays you have lots of various different automation options, various different tools, either sort of generic tools like Jira or something like that, or bespoke tools like our own Flow product. Lots of people try to use things like Excel. They're okay from a tracking perspective, but they don't really help you with the next step, which is automation of the project. An Excel sheet doesn't generate a task. It can only capture an update after it's already happened. And so those types of mechanisms are not quite as good as automation workflow tools. So what does an ideal process look like? Well, it's actually very difficult to describe it in this type of environment, mostly because it will vary from place to place. Everybody has their own different departments, the way they're set up. Everybody's teams have different responsibilities and so on and so forth. So it's quite difficult. What I can do though is I can start thinking about some of the key traits that are shared by efficient processes across various different firms. And so I'll talk about 3 here. The first one is that it is regularly reviewed. I talked right at the beginning about the importance of spending time on your process, not time executing your process. Regularly reviewing your process, making sure that it's up to date, refining it and improving it as you go. That's a really important trait that you have in efficient processes. Number 2, ideally it is implemented in software. As I said, it's not just something that's in somebody's head and they just think that they're following at any point in time. It needs to be rigorously captured and enforced, preferably inside of software. And number 3, everything should be tracked. Absolutely everything should be tracked. And this is one of the biggest problems that we see in all of the onboarding processes and connectivity generally, is that there's a lot of information that's just lost inside of people's email inboxes, or it happened on the phone and there's no sort of record of that. When that person leaves the firm, so too does all of that information and all that knowledge. Having everything rigorously tracked inside of software is the right way to go. It becomes a knowledge base for them, for anybody else who's coming in and picking those things up. So With that all said, what are the areas that you can look for improvement today? What are the quick wins that you can go for? Well, I'm going to talk about 4 here, but there are actually more available, and you can come and have a chat with us and get some more information about the other ones. But if I just go over 4 important ones, the first thing is actually clarifying the scope up front. One thing that we hear time and time again is that actually the salesperson has gone out and sold your trading service, normally to much fanfare, but the handoff from the salesperson down to the person who's doing the onboarding, or perhaps doing the upgrade or something like that, is quite poor. Normally, the very first task of the onboarder is to actually clarify, what is it you're building to here? Which functionality do you even need? Because that normally doesn't come from the salesperson. So getting that clarity about scope up front is really, really important. It sets the tone for the entire project and puts you out on the right first foot. So that's the first thing I would say. Second thing is getting all of the information that you need right up front. So this is part of the thing about designing your process. If you designed your process end to end, you'd understand all of the various different inputs that you need from the customer or perhaps from their vendor throughout the entire process. I need IP addresses, source IP addresses for my firewall. I need the target comp IDs that you might be sending to me. I need a list of which functionality you need. All of these things, whatever they are for your particular purpose, all of those things should be captured as quickly as you possibly can right up front, so you don't have to keep going back and asking for more information later on in the process. So have a think about what those items might be. The third one is identifying tasks that can happen in parallel. So the more stuff that you can do in parallel, the faster the overall end-to-end project timeline is. And what that means is thinking about the order in which things occur. Time and time again, people who don't have their process implemented in software, but it's some sort of Excel spreadsheet, and they're bouncing around between various different columns about what they need to do. It's never quite clear to them which tasks they can carry on progressing. If you've got a good piece of software, the piece of software will tell you can progress tracks A, B, and D, but track C at the moment, you're waiting on somebody else for some sort of other input or something like that. And that helps you move more in parallel. Okay, so think about that. Parallel work, identify the tasks, which bits can go in parallel, what are the dependencies between the various different tasks. And number 4, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I'll leave on this as well. Really do think about software to implement these processes. Excel is great from a tracking perspective, but it does not help automate the process. And really, that's what you should be trying to aim for. The more processes that you have automated, the more you can do it in parallel, and you don't need as much resource to actually implement the same number of customers. Or more importantly, the same amount of resource can now spend more quality time with customers, understanding their needs, helping them more proactively than simply firefighting against the thing in the background. I hope that helps. So the answer is yes, it is possible to streamline onboarding. Lots of detail there. There's more detail in other videos. So please do check out the other videos on this channel. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, as I said, and I'll see you in the next video.